Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Work Wednesday. Welcome back to the space. Welcome back to this time that we offer ourselves to take pause. And, um, it's so interesting how our body kind of holds on to our life experience and our stress, and how our body sort of we create an imprint in our physical body for our life experience. On some level, it becomes like a map. And so this morning I woke up feeling like I was, you know, feeling like I have this intense pain in the back of my left shoulder and almost right underneath my shoulder blade. And so it feels like almost like I'm being stabbed in the back and I can't get a deep breath. And so it's a very interesting physical representation of something, potentially physical. I was, moving some furniture around, but also energetically, sort of like what's happening in the ethers and how the world is sort of unfolding in this present moment. And I'm not going to speak to the specifics of that, but I will let you know that when there is outer world stress, when there's stress and listen, there always is on some level, but when things get extreme, then our body sort of responds and reacts in a slightly different way. And if we're personally feeling like we are in any way, you know, under a certain amount of pressure or stress, then our body is going to hold it. Sometimes it can hold it and we can still keep moving, and sometimes we hold it and then we get a physical like, hey, pay attention. And so for the past couple of weeks, I've definitely been in this mode of like, what are we doing? Right? What are we all doing? And so really giving yourself this moment to pause, because we are in this threshold space. Things are getting lighter and quicker and more mobile as we move into Vata season, the season of air and space. So there is that lightness that can, you know, support us and move us. But then there's also the heaviness of just the reality of the world and the stress that is showing up. And then also the fact that we're moving into the darkness. So you're potentially seeing in the outer world how it is getting darker earlier, and how that's sort of like we're starting to burrow in. So there's a density and a heaviness, and I've been talking about this a lot. And then there's also this lightness energetically and etherically, that there's a quickening and things are shifting and moving. And so it does offer us this opportunity to step into our life with the lens of maybe a new beginning or a fresh start, or um, the space of possibility. But then it also offers the potency of the grounding and the rooting and the moving into the darkness. So how are we going to root into our own hearts? And how are we going to root into our presence? And how are we going to root into our knowing and our wisdom? And can we hold the knowing and the wisdom we have, that in such a way that it allows us to move forward, that it allows us to take the next step, that it allows us to, step into the possibility of the new beginning. And granted, when we start something anew, it's not like we erase the slate and then here we go. It's that we are holding, or we are building upon the reality of, everything that has come before. We are building upon all of our life experience, all of our knowing, all of our accumulated wisdom, and all of our accumulated pain and our accumulated experience, because so much of that pain and so much of the experience have given us information, has given us information and has given us a knowing in a different way. And I'm not going to stand here and say that everything happens for a reason, because I think it's a spiritual bypass that really messes with a lot of people. And I do think very often things happen because there is a reason, that an action led to a consequence. But I do believe that at some point we can often at least glean some knowing, some wisdom from the experiences that we have been through, that we have worked through, that we have had to navigate in our life. And it offers us, a platform to move to the next step. And so I want to stay in the space of hope and possibility, because I do feel like this moment we could go to the other extreme very quickly, and for good reason. And I don't want to stay in the space of hope and possibility because we're spiritually bypassing reality or the truth. But I want to hold the paradox and the knowing that, like, that things happen and they can be terrible and awful and significant, and there can also at the same time be the space for, rebirth and new beginning and um life, the regenerative, affirming presence of life. And in moments like this, sometimes it's hard to access. So feel your sitting bones root and let your body settle. And I'm gonna just kind of move a little bit. Maybe move your head a little from side to side, or roll your shoulders, or roll both shoulders, or just shake your hands out a little bit, shake your wrists. Open your mouth to release your jaw. So anything that you're holding on to. And I'm going to dip my chin down for a second just so I can see if I can find that breath in the back of the lungs. So the lungs hold grief. The minute I felt that sort of ice pick feeling in my left shoulder this morning, I was like, "Oh, that's the grief." So can you breathe into the grief that sits in the lungs, that sits in the back body? And can you find that fullness, almost lean back into it, and then let the shoulders come away from the ears, lift the chin, open the throat. Maybe the eyes stay closed. Maybe they stay open, whatever feels better to you. We're never really taught to hold paradox in this life. We're taught to, you know, bypass reality and pretend to be happy. We are very often taught that, like we have to be happy. And we are not often taught that we can have joy and then also be experiencing heart wrenching sadness and grief at the same time. And I really believe that if we're taught this kind of emotional intelligence, if we can find the space where this kind of emotional intelligence lives in our body, and if you go deep underneath the constructs of, whatever that lens was of you have to be happy, and in order to be happy, you have to have this, 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 and this, and this is what makes you happy. Whatever that prescription um, that is sort of sitting in your consciousness, we all have one to a certain degree. Oh, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if this happens. And it's like, well, happy is fleeting, and there are moments of happiness for sure, but can we find our own connection to our potential ecstatic joy and let it sit next to that grief, the pain, the sadness, because very often that is really more true. And when we can go to this space of, oh yeah, I can hold this. I have the capacity to hold this. It changes how we navigate and how we move through life. And maybe not that the outer world extremes are necessarily going to shift, but our inner experience of those extremes become more a norm of, oh yeah, okay, these two things can be inhabiting the same space, and I can still feel my own joy even as the world is literally falling apart around me. And what does it take to find that? And so can we soften here, and can we feel the rise and the fall of the breath? And can we find the space of our own stillness, the space of quiet? And sometimes it's really hard to quiet the mind, and we're not fully quieting the mind. We're never going to get to a place where we necessarily have total silence. I mean, we may, But excuse me. The reality is that we want to soften that first layer of chatter so that we can get to our depth. We can get to that space of knowing. So allowing the breath to draw you into the layers of your being and into your regenerative, restorative, your affirming power to hold space for yourself, to hold space for your wisdom and your knowing. And as we honor this space, we draw ourselves in. And it's almost as if we're gathering all the pieces of us that were, extended out in some way or given away. And so, can we draw those pieces back? We draw back into our own wholeness. And then, can we plant ourselves? Can we root ourselves in our own presence and in our own hearts? And then it's from here, from this deep connection to ourselves and to our knowing and to our capacity and to our ability to hold paradox and the reality of life. And then we move forward from this place. And in this moment, we're potentially planting ourselves. What do we want to create? And when I ask you that question, I really mean, how do you want to show up for yourself? How are you going to show up for your own heart and your own body and your own mind? How are you going to stay present to your boundaries? How are you going to stay present to your needs? And so before we reach out, before we move out into the world or extend ourselves in some way to try to be met, can we turn inward? This is not about not receiving help or not receiving what we need from the outer world, but this is about receiving from ourselves first. So we create this internal relationship. We create this opportunity for us to be fully present to ourselves. So we are not bypassing this. We are not just automatically turning out to get what we need. And then also, if you are somebody who only turns inward to get what they need, then practicing that ability to turn inward, to meet the need, to know the need, and then if we do in fact need help from the outer world, to reach out, to be present enough and to be vulnerable enough to ask for what we need. And just even as I sit here with you for these few moments, that sort of acute pain in my shoulder is shifting. And so honor our capacity also to create enough space to allow our bodies to heal. It doesn't mean they always will, but very often we do need maybe help from the outer world in some way. But can you meet yourself here first? Draw your hands into prayer in front of your heart, honoring your willingness and your capacity and your ability to show up for yourself in this way and to plant any intentions and take root in your own heart. Gently bowing your head to your heart and to your body, to your mind, to this resource you hold. Namaste. I hope you all have a beautiful week, and I will see you soon. Bye.